We're going to start competition. First team on the boards, Alden and Sophia. For execution, 6, 7, 7, 7. For synchro, 7, 6.5, 7.5, 6.5, 7. Lita en Jonna. For execution, 6.5, 6, 7, 6.5. For synchro, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6. Sarah and Evelyn. For execution, 7, 7, 6, 5.5. For synchro, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 7, 6.5. Emily and Iris. Emily and Iris. Clara en Antonia. For execution, 6.5, 6, 6, 6. For synchro, 7, 7, 7, 7.5, 7. L'Oreal and Sienna. execution, 6.5, 7, 5, 5.5. For Synchro, 6, 6.5, 6, 6, 6. Agathe and Savannah. Execution, 6, 6.5, 5, 5. For Synchro, 6, 5.5, 5.5, 6.5, 7. Mary and Mala. Execution, 5, 7, 4.5, 5.5. For Synchro, 5, 5, 5.5, 6.5, 5.5. Catalina and Colette. Five and a half, 6, 4.5, 4 for execution, and for Synchro, 6, 6, 4.5, 5.5, 6. Arya and Simran. Execution, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6. For Synchro, 6, 5.5, 6.5, 6, 6.5. Round 2. Alden and Sophia. Execution, 7.5, 7.5, 6, 5.5. For Synchro, 7.5, 7.5, 8, 6.5, 7. Lita and Jonna. Execution, 6, 6, 5, 5. For Synchro, 6.5, 5.5, 5, 6.5, 6. Sarah and Emily. execution, 6.5, 6, 5, 5.5. For synchro, 7, 7.5, 8, 6.5, 6.5. Clara en Antonia. For execution, 5, 7, 5.5, 5. For synchro, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 7.5. L'Oreal and Sienna. For execution, 4.5, 6, 5.5, 6. For synchro, 7, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 6.5. Agar and Savannah. For execution, 6.5, 6, 5.5, 5.5. For synchro, 6.5, 7, 6, 7, 6. Miri and Mala. For execution, 5, 5, 5, 5.5. For synchro, 6, 7, 5.5, 7, 6. Catharina en Colette. For execution, 5.5, 6.5, 4, 4. For synchro, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 6. Arja en Simmer. Execution 3. Floor. For execution, 6.5, 6, 5, 5.5. For synchro, 6, 7, 5.5, 6, 6.5. Round 3, Alden and Sophia. Three and a half, 5, 5.5. For synchro, 5, 5, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Lita en Jonna. For execution, 6.5, 7, 5, 5.5. For synchro, 6, 5.5, 6, 6, 6. Sarah and Evelyn. For execution, 6.5, 7, 4, 5.5. For synchro, 7, 6, 7, 6.5, 6.5. Clara and Antonia. For execution, 6, 5, 4, 4. For synchro, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 5.5. L'Oreal and Sienna. For execution, 6.5, 7.5, 6, 6. For synchro, 7, 8, 7.5, 7.5, 6.5. Aga and Savannah. For execution, 2.5, 2.5, 3, 2.5. For synchro, 3.5, 4, 4, 4, 4.5. en mannen. For execution, 4.5, 4.5, 5, 4.5. For synchro, 5, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 4.5. Catharina en Colette. For execution, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 4. For synchro, 5.5, 6, 6, 6.5, 6. Aya en Simran. For execution, 4.5, 5, 4, 4.5. For synchro, 5.5, 4, 5, 4.5, 4.5. Round 4. Olden en Sophia. For execution, 2.5, 2, 5, 6.5. For synchro, 4, 5, 3.5, 4.5, 4.5. Lita en Jongen. Execution, 4.5, 6.5, 6, 6. For synchro, 5.5, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 5.5. Sarah en Emily. For execution, 7, 6, 4.5, 6.5. For synchro, 7.5, 7.5, 8, 7.5, 7.5. Clara en Antonie. execution, 4.5, 4, 3, 3. For synchro, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 4.5, 4.5. L'Oreal and Sienna. For execution, 6.5, 7.5, 5, 4.5. For synchro, 7, 6.5, 7, 6.5, 6. Agathe and Savannah. For execution, 6, 5, 4, 4. For synchro, 5.5, 6, 6, 6.5, 5. Mary en Malla. For execution, 4.5, 5.5, 3.5, 3.5. For synchro, 4.5, 4, 4, 4, 4. Catharina en Colette. For execution, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 5. For synchro, 6, 5.5, 6, 5, 6. Aria and Simran. For execution, 3.5, 4, 3, 4. For synchro, 4, 5, 4.5, 5.5, 5. Round 5, Alden and Sophia. execution, 5.5, 5, 4, 3.5. For Synchro, 6, 6.5, 5.5, 6, 5. Lita en Jonna. For execution, 5, 5, 5, 5. For Synchro, 5.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5. Sarah and Emily. For execution, 7, 7, 5, 4.5. For Synchro, 6.5, 7, 7, 6.5, 5.5. Clara en Anthony. For execution, 6.5, 6, 5.5, 4. For Synchro, 6, 6.5, 6.5, 6, 6.5. L'Oreal and Sienna. Execution, 5.5, 6, 4.5, 4.5. For Synchro, 6, 6.5, 7.5, 7, 7. Agathe and Solana. For execution, 6, 5.5, 5, 5.5. For Synchro, 6.5, 5.5, 6, 6.5, 7. Mary and Mala. For execution, 2.5, 3.5, 3, 2. For synchro, 4.5, 4, 4, 5.5, 4.5. Catharina en Colette. For execution, 5.5, 6, 5, 5. For synchro, 6, 5, 5.5, 6.5, 6. Aya en Simon. For execution, 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 4. For synchro, 4.5, 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 4. This was the last dive in this competition. Thank you, judges. Thank you, secretaries. Next competition, the last competition of this weekend. It will be men's synchro 3-meter board and women synchro 3-meter board. The judges for that competition. That will start 10 past 12 instead of 4 past 12. So next competition will start 10 past 12.